Smith and Ned Chaillet. Radio 3, it's 10 o'clock, and we come now to a recording of a solo concert given by the American pianist Keith Jarrett in the Royal Festival Hall in London last July. It's introduced by Ian Carr.
These solo concerts by Jarrett, which are totally improvised, are now rare and eagerly anticipated events. During the latter half of the 1970s and the early 1980s, his public performances consisted largely of these marathon, indeed almost superhuman solo concerts, in which he created everything from scratch: rhythms, harmonies, melodies, structures and textures. In the last few years, however, he spent much time playing classical music, while his improvising activities have been mostly confined to his trio. Born in 1945, Keith Jarrett was an infant prodigy and began piano lessons at the age of 3. From the start, he also began improvising his own music, and at 6 gave his first recital playing classical pieces and some of his own compositions. His improvising genius soon gained recognition, and at 20 he spent 4 months with Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, leaving them to join the epoch-making Charles Lloyd Quartet. After that, he spent 1970 and 71 in the Miles Davis Band, during which time he also led his own trio and quartet. His improvised solo concerts began in 1973, and when 2 were recorded at Bremen and Lausanne, the resulting triple LP caused a sensation. However, in the later 70s, Jarrett began a re-examination of classical music, and by the early 80s was giving concert performances of orchestral works. A crisis came when he played only classical music for a whole year, and said that not having the opportunity to improvise was like not being allowed to pray. After that experience, he radically cut down his classical concerts, but continued to make recordings of classical music. In the year before this recent London appearance, he recorded Book 2 of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier, Shostakovich's Preludes, and, with recorder player Michaela Petri, Handel's Recorder Sonatas. The London concert consisted of 2 long improvisations, and between them you can hear part of a conversation I had with Jarrett in America a couple of years ago. But first, the music. The first part of Keith Jarrett's solo concert at the Royal Festival Hall last July. Before we hear the second half, here's part of a conversation I had with Jarrett a couple of years ago. We discussed his ethnic album Spirits, his recordings of the hymns of the Armenian philosopher Gurdjieff, and of Book 1 of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier. And I asked him why he'd written in the liner notes to the Bach, "This music does not require my assistance."
It seems to me that when you concentrate on how you interpret something, you are then not participating as much in the actual bigger thing. So we're talking about Spirits, we're talking about the Gurdjieff recording in a way, and we're talking about the Bach recording all at the same time. Because to participate in the bigger thing, you just have to do it, you know? And if it tells you to keep doing it, then that's the message. But there are only certain composers you can really get away with this. I mean, you can't do that with Chopin. I mean, it's not going to... That's a personal, emotional thing. But with Bach, the emotions, to me, are there, clearly, in the notes. And I think even the pulse... I mean, to me, pulse can be music, but to a classical player, pulse is only pulse.
Yes, I know.
So you see, I mean, for me, I can get into the pulse and say, that's it, here we are. And they'll say, well, that's just the tempo. You know, but I might say, yes, that's just the tempo if you play it like this, but it's not just the tempo if you're in the tempo when you're playing it. Then it's music. Well, if Bach wrote something to be expressed outside of the tempo in the Well-Tempered Clavier, those things I don't hesitate to express, you know. But I think this tradition of personalizing things is not all that interesting to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be personalized. You know, who else would have played? All you have to do is listen to the first prelude, where everyone says, "Oh, you can." Someone said, "I heard this in the store, and I knew right away that was you playing." I said, "What?" I guess I guess so. But I didn't do that. I mean, I didn't say this is how this has to sound because I want everyone to know that this is how I feel about this, man. You know, yes. I think Bach's music transcends having to do that, and Actually, the Gurdjieff music, for a complete different set of reasons, doesn't need that. It just doesn't need that. Gurdjieff's music, the spaces are always asymmetrical. Not always, but when you least expect them to be, they are, and when you expect them to be, they aren't. And if you don't play straight, then you're playing everything symmetrically rubato, let's say. I mean, symmetrically out of tempo. And Bach the notes are so much on the beat that when you take them off the beat, you are then expressing something different than the notes. You know, it's like, there they are, here it is, this is on 2. You can get away with arpeggiating this, like on a harpsichord. If I played that on a harpsichord, it would be a lot less, it would sound more personal, because the harpsichord played in tempo sounds like a sewing machine, in that kind of tempo, a fast tempo. But it's very expressive if you just take little liberties with the stuff. But anyway. Anyway, none of that, to me, I mean, someone asked me once, I played the Bartok Third Concerto with the orchestra, and I came backstage, and they said, what exactly do you think your vision of this piece is? And I said, no, I don't have a vision of this piece. When I hear the first note of the piece, the orchestra plays it, in this case, I'm starting to hear the piece. I'm starting to see the piece. I don't have a vision of the piece when it's not being played. Maybe this is all due to my concentration on the moment, you know, and being an improviser. But then that's what I bring to the music. Strangely enough, what I bring to Bach is the opposite of what someone would think I would bring to Bach, because they would think about emotional expression. But that's from their point of view. From my point of view, I don't think about that even when I'm improvising. It's just what I hear, you know.
Yes, sure.
There's more on the music paper in Bach than there is, you know, almost any other composer I know. There's less that you have to give to it, but if you don't give anything to it, it's going to sound like shit, of course, you know. But I also meant that it doesn't need my personality. You know, that's really what I meant. I remember the day that in my jazz playing in Belgium in the 60s, after intermission with the trio that I had at the time, I remember coming out on stage and knowing that now I was not going to be concerned anymore with style, with having a personal expression, that now I was just going to play the piano. And it was a tremendous relief to realize that, okay, now what I do is personal. I mean, okay, it's personal. It's everything I do is close to me, or it feels bad. So what you say and what I said about noticing that first prelude, it's the result of that realization in Belgium.